This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
This is Sarah, and I just want to take a moment to speak to you about this week's sponsor, Favor. Favor, Inc. is a statewide family-led nonprofit 501c3 organization that is committed to empowering families as advocates and partners in improving educational and health outcomes for our children. Favor is the Connecticut state organization of the Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health. Favor offers a single place for families with children who have medical, mental, emotional, and behavioral health challenges to find information, assistance, and training. To find out more about Favor, please go to favor-ct.org. We are grateful for our opportunity to work with Favor as a sponsor, and now on to the rest of the episode.
This episode is brought to you by CogniView. CogniView provides cognitive assessment tools to a broad range of healthcare providers for the early detection of cognitive impairment. Early detection allows patients to address modifiable risk factors sooner, potentially changing the course of cognitive decline. It also allows healthcare providers to develop a plan with the patient and caregiver so the patient can live their best life during their journey. For more information, go to www.cognivue.com. That's www.cognivue.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Caregiver Chronicles. My name is Sarah, and today I have Charlotte Bayala with me today. Charlotte is a yoga and meditation coach. She's also a caregiver for her husband and the founder and creator and host of podcast Love Your Caregiving Life. Hello, Charlotte. How are you today?
Thank you. I am so happy to be here with you, Sarah. Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you so much for being here. Would you like to further introduce yourself to my audience?
Yeah, I have been a caregiver for my husband for over a decade now, and in trying to figure out how to make all of the caregiving make sense to me, and in a way to process in a way that I didn't expect it, I started the podcast about 3.5 years ago. Love Your Caregiving Life started out as me simply telling stories that I wish I had heard from other caregivers, because at that time, I didn't see myself in anyone else. And so there are a lot of things that, had I known they were normal, probably would have caused less stress and distress in having the thoughts, feelings, and situations that I found myself in where it really felt lonely, even though I was surrounded by people who were there to support me.
Thank you so much for that. And do you want to talk a little bit about your journey as a caregiver and how it started?
Of course. It was 2013, I believe. My husband was diagnosed with papillary thyroid cancer. We were a young family. My daughter, I believe, was in first or second grade, and we were just living our best lives. I was teaching yoga and meditation. My husband had a corporate job, and things were just going really well. And so, as all cancer diagnosis come as mostly a surprise to everyone and flips everyone's lives upside down, that happened to us. His cancer is not ever going to go away. He will have to live with it. It'll be what they call sometimes chronic cancer diagnosis, because it had already spread into his lymphatic system before they removed his thyroid. So that means that for me, caregiving will be a lifelong role for me to have. And as some of us caregivers have, it is not a constant high alert state of caregiving there are times where things feel really stressful and other times where we're okay in between the 6-month scan testing oncology appointments and just feel the increased stress right before that happens. So it just really depends on the year, the month, on, how stressful caregiving can become for me and for his just treatment plan. And so it took me a while. I have to say, even though I had the skills to learn how to care for myself when he was first diagnosed, I found that there were a lot of things that felt like they were uncontrollable, like anger and fear and worry was a big one. I would find myself just crying at anything. It was like I had a Hallmark or a cat, commercial running nonstop in my brain, the ones that just make you tear up and you're like, why is this happening? It took a while, for me to finally say, this is not normal. And so I reached out to my doctor and she told me, to consider meditating because I was really becoming overwhelmed with these emotions that if I could find a place to center myself, I could start to respond to things instead of reacting and start to have a little bit more opening to enjoy life. That all sounds good. The problem is I was actively teaching people how to meditate. And so I found it very enraging for someone to tell me to use a skill that I was teaching other people to use. And I always like to let people know that because oftentimes caregivers are told what they should be doing to care for themselves. I had those skills. I was actively teaching people how to use them and leading them in classes, hours and hours a week. But I would turn that off as soon as I left and kind of switch into that caregiver mode and didn't let the two intertwine. And so there was a little period of being defiant. And then finally I realized, yeah, she's right. And I decided to start working on that. And so over the years, that has really that helped me kind of have a balance between stress levels that we have as caregivers and being able to enjoy my life. I found that you can have a really stressful life and still enjoy things that happen. Your husband or wife or child can be in distress and you can have moments where you feel joy. Learning how to embrace both and instead of things having to be either or is really what I had to learn over my years of caregiving. And so he is thriving as a human being and we're enjoying life together. And basically, we just take a pause anytime, we have to check in to see how his health is. And then we go back into play and record and we move on. So that's kind of the situation that we're in right now.
Yeah. And I want to just go back to, you said it can, you were basically saying like you can have things happen and still find joy in
Right.
other situations. And that is something that is so hard for family caregivers to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's just something that even, and you can be an expert life coach, you can be an expert on self-care, you can be anything and still have a hard time sometimes finding the balance of like, this is this,
Mm-hmm.
but while I'm struggling with this, I can still find joy in this other thing. And
Yeah.
even, and even as far as it goes with the self-care, you were teaching meditation, but
Mm-hmm.
not taking that moment for yourself each day.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah. I think it's good for people to hear that anyone that in this field that talks about self-care or coaching, that none of us as human beings find change easy. And self-preservation is really the default mode we go into. And so when we're extremely stressed out, all of the other things that we seem to think are frivolous, unnecessary, to get through the moment have to fall to the side. We all do it. But the reason why that matters is because if a caregiver hasn't had any exposure to having any of those skills, or to feel what it's like to finish a meditation session, or to just take a moment of just quiet in the midst of the storm of the day that they're in, to step outside or drink a cup of coffee, whatever it is, taking just 5 minutes for themselves. If they don't have the experience or be able to recall what that felt like, it's hard for anyone to care for themselves. But also, if it's hard for you and you try it and it fails, it's not a reason to stop and give up, and to say that you're just not that type of person. It's not going to work for you. You're just going to try to learn to live with being unhappy, because it happens to all of us. All of us, even the ones who are teaching people how to do these things, we also fall to the side. Things fall apart for us. And so don't ever think that you don't deserve, or you're not skilled enough, or it just isn't in the cards for you. It is. It will take a little extra effort and sometimes need for, some help in learning how to do something that actually fits into your life.
Yeah. And I think that that's a good thing also that you reiterated for, for family caregivers and, for anybody. It's taking the time to learn this skill and
Mhm.
relearn this skill, and how does it fit in your life. Self-care is very it's very fluid. It's not
Yes.
people think it's very cut and dry. You meditate for self-care, or
Yeah.
you go get your nails done for self-care, or sometimes it's lavish things like massages, or the and it's really not. It's
Mhm.
self-care is very, very fluid. It can be a glass of wine. Self-care
Mhm.
can be your favorite TV show. Self-care
Mhm.
can be a nap on the couch.
Right.
It can be all of these things that we think are unproductive. In
Right.
that moment, if that's what you need to do to make yourself feel better, it's what you got to do. And I know I'm also studying meditation coaching right now, actually, and a Reiki master. And there are times, despite me being in Reiki and having multiple Reiki certificates and things like that, where I just can't do it for myself. There,
Yeah.
there are days where I just can't sit there, and I know I need it, and I know it's going to help me.
Yeah.
But there are days where I'm just mentally not in the space to do that type of self-care for myself, and I need to lower my bar for
Mhm.
self-care. And
Yeah.
when we spoke, we talked a little bit about making mundane things like teeth brushing and stuff
Mhm.
self-care.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that some more,
Of
please?
course. Yeah. I think that no matter where you are in being able to care for yourself, whether you do it never, occasionally, or all the time, there are opportunities to use throughout the day to make them little moments for yourself. And especially if you're in a really high stress caregiving period of time for you, finding something that you already do and attaching a moment for yourself in that, so that you can remember, because remembering how to do something new that you're adding new into a day is extremely difficult to do unless you have post-it notes all over the place, and then you see a post-it note and then you actually have to do it. But it's things, 5 minutes at a time. Like when you wake up, no one knows you're awake unless your eyes are open and they're just staring at you, which I have a child, so that in my past has happened, maybe 3 o'clock in the morning too. But, you notice that you're waking up and I normally am extremely stressed out and I go over all the bad things I expect to happen in my day. And so before I get out of the bed, I just feel sick to my stomach, and over anxious because I don't want to do it. So that would be a good time for you to tell yourself, I'm going to enjoy my fluffy pillow, the feel of my sheets. I'm just going to breathe a little. Nothing special, nothing that you have to buy or listen to. I'm just going to not allow myself to think about what I'm going to do in this day. I'm just going to allow myself to enjoy the moment that I'm having. When you're brushing your teeth, you can, look at yourself in the mirror, because I don't know that all of us like stare at ourselves while we're brushing our teeth, but the mirror is usually right there. And you can just look at yourself and mentally tell yourself, you got this. Like, I got this. This is going to be a good day. Affirmations, or actually, just noticing the scent of your toothpaste, or if you had a really horrible day the day before, you can see that as a way that you're brushing away and cleaning out all the residue from all of these emotions and feelings and things that were said the day before, so that you can start the day fresh. And that moves on throughout your day. A cup of coffee, just sitting and noticing how it feels, how it sounds, how it looks. Anytime that you can just take 5 minutes in a period of what you're already doing. Maybe you go get the mail every day and you have to walk outside to do that. Take a little longer to go get that mail and come back. If you're caring for someone who takes a nap every day, well, that nap time, even it's just 5 minutes of your time, because maybe you're rushing to try to do things you can't do while they're awake. Take the first 5 minutes to just sit without your phone in your hand, without, anything playing in your head. Just like sit and look out the window, sit and breathe. It's about really finding moments of your day where you can tell your body that you're safe. Because what happens is, when we are under any kind of stress, our body is in a constant fight or flight stress response. And that's what creates cortisol. That's what causes, over time, stress-based illnesses. And so what happens is we're always there, because if you don't take a moment to tell your body, I'm safe, it's always going to be in that stress mode. And the way to tell your body that you're safe is to actually stop doing. And like you said, do all those things that feel unproductive. Do those things where you're not thinking about what is stressing you out. What are the things that are making you anxious? It's doing the things that just let you breathe, let you take a moment to just release. And I get it. Sometimes those moments allow enough of an opening to let emotions come out that we've been trying to like hide down deep. So it can get uncomfortable to take time for yourself, because you feel that you'll be judged, or maybe you feel like you're selfish. But in all reality, these moments throughout your day are necessary for you to be able to be the caregiver that I think you'd want to be for the person you care for. And the easiest way to do it is to really just find something you do daily, on a regular basis, and find a way to turn that into just a moment for yourself.
Yep. And I think that that's great too. And I think that a lot of caregivers, again, fiscally, lavish self-care is just not an option.
Yeah.
Time wise, a lot of forms of self-care are just not. I don't know a lot of caregivers who have a half hour to sit down and meditate, or 45 minutes for yoga, or whatever.
Right.
I know a lot of caregivers who don't even have time to make breakfast.
Right.
You know what I mean? So adding it in to the thing that you have to do, and just adding a couple extra seconds if that's what needs to do, and finding those little pockets throughout your day for self-care is so important. That's something we've been like really trying to drive home on Caregiver Chronicles. And I know other, caregiver influencers and caregiver podcasters are sharing these same tips, because this is the only way sometimes to get self-care. It's hard, it sucks, but it's the way. So do you want to talk a little bit about how your program, Love Your Caregiving Life, how that's helped in how you help family caregivers?
Yeah. Through the program, there are actually different options that'll be coming up where we are going to work on some specific things throughout next year. I've decided that there are 4 things that people really like to show up to try to get help with. And that's setting boundaries. It's having a little more help in finding the 5 minutes in their day. I mean, it sounds simple, but it's not. And sometimes you just need to talk it through and problem solve and strategize with another person. Because let's face it, prioritizing ourselves oftentimes is difficult to do. So trying to figure out how to do that 5 minutes a day can be challenging. We'll do something the end of next year for helping how to strategize and actually enjoy your holidays, because as a lot of people are caregivers and things have changed, it's, how to address change in traditions so that you can still do them, but we're just going to talk about how can we change these things? How can you enjoy your time at a time where it's really sometimes difficult to be happy? And setting boundaries is the other one. So those are going to be the 4 things that I work with people next year. And then overall, there's always the being able to just work with me and on an as needed basis. Basically, we just get together once a month and I literally just say, all right, how can I help you today? And so sometimes people just want to hear what they're thinking come out of their mouth and be able to say it to someone who's not going to judge them, who's not going to feel hurt. So I'm kind of this impartial person that can really just be a sounding board. And from there, what I do is we talk about, I'll ask them questions to kind of maybe get them to think of different options or to be able to process what they're feeling and to definitely validate what they're going through. Because I think a lot of times with caregivers, feeling lonely is one of the biggest issues because you don't feel like you have someone that can actually understand what you're going through. And then you're stuck with not talking about things that really are normal for most caregivers, but you don't have a person, an outlet for that issue. And then from there, when it's with a regular coaching call, I will give them and help them find a way towards that goal that they want to have. So if it's, I want to be able to enjoy my life with my husband, okay, well, if you can't go out and you guys loved going out to eat, let's talk about some of the different options that you have, because oftentimes what happens is caregivers, they want their new life to fit into how the old life went. And so if you have a person that you care for that won't enjoy going out to do something, can't be in a movie theater because of the constraints, because of the dark now, because there's something that's stopping them. But that is what you always did. And that's how you enjoyed time with them. Well, how can we change that? How can we do that at home? How can we do it in open air? So oftentimes it's finding solutions and or me connecting them with other organizations, other options for things that they can do for themselves. So it's really it's like talking to your friend. Like if you ever had a mom group and you're like, this pacifier is not working. And then there's another person's like, oh no, I totally get that. Here's what I used. And so it's really what the person needs, but those are the types of things that we do together.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And I really like what you were saying about, date night and how, how to make it fit in or whatever event or thing that you did with the person you cared for. Because, some people are here to care for their kids. Some people care for their spouse. Some of my listeners care for a parent or a grandparent. And, what is something that you enjoyed and how can you still do it, but accommodate it and make it your thing? That was a hard lesson we had to learn over time with our kids. We loved going on little trips and little day trips and stuff. And it looks different for us now than when they were little boys, or even when we had one child. Camping looks different. My son is on a safety harness the whole time. However, I know he's not going to run into the ocean with the safety harness on, or whatever it is that you need to do to accommodate. And sometimes I know that a lot of times accommodations and things that you have to do for yourself or for the person you care for when you're out in public
Mm-hmm.
might be controversial to other people,
Mm-hmm.
might be looked down on, there might be a stigma to it.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to remember that you are doing this for you and the person you care for. You're not doing it for anybody else,
Yeah.
or you are.
Right.
And you
And
need
and I
to let
I
that go.
think that when I talk about that with people that I work with, it just helps to have someone say, "No, you're not crazy." And who cares? Just to have like a cheerleader so that when you're in that moment, you're like, oh, well, this person that actually knows me agrees that this is a good idea. Sometimes you just need that reassurance to have the courage to do the things that you already know you need to do to enjoy life with your family. Sometimes it's just having that person that can say, yeah, you should definitely do that. Like, who cares what everyone else thinks? I mean, we all just have to figure out how we can enjoy life. What is the point of being a caregiver to help someone live if you can't enjoy living with the person that you're caring for?
Exactly. I love that. Thank you so much for that. And I also want to ask you a little bit more about what type of family caregivers do you help? Is it all types? Is it just spousal caregivers?
Yeah, it's all types of caregivers. Of course, my experience is with spousal caregivers and being a cancer caregiver. However, if you take a look at the podcast, I'm pretty sure anything we talk about is something that will connect to a caregiver that's looking at it. I found after having so many conversations with different caregivers and having other people on the podcast and feedback from the podcast episodes through the newsletter, people will just reply back, oh my goodness, this is so me. It's that we all go through a lot of similar things. Our reason for caregiving is different. Our life experiences are different, but I'm pretty sure that someone who, two different women who care for their mother who has Alzheimer's, their experience is 100% different from each other. There's similarities, but their life, are two different lives. And so I think that all of us being able to connect and not segment ourselves out into, well, this is only for an Alzheimer caregiver. No, I just talked to someone who wrote a book for his story for Alzheimer's, caring for his wife, and I cried through the whole thing. I don't have any experience with Alzheimer's, but his story and the things that he had to go through really connected to my life and my story with my husband. So I feel like being able to help everyone with the main issues that we have as caregivers is always, for me, has always been a good goal to have.
Yeah. And thank you so much for that and clarifying that. I know sometimes, when you're listening to a podcast and you hear someone talk about their experience as a caregiver and how they can help, they feel like it's only for caregivers in that lane of
Right.
caregiving, but a lot of caregiving overlaps.
Mm-hmm.
I know, my work in a long-term care facility, a lot of that information, a lot of that experience, a lot of that knowledge that I gained in those years, I have had to use to help support my child, even though it's
Mm-hmm.
completely different.
Right.
And, I know, and there's still things that I have to learn, don't get me wrong, but it's, there's still a lot. Same thing in caring for my grandmother, just because I cared for people with Alzheimer's for all those years didn't make it any easier
Right.
caring for my grandmother with the same condition.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just I appreciate you for sharing that. And I'd like to talk about your podcast a bit more. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah. I actually, it's a little bit of a out there story. I was working at the time at a yoga studio and I had just started, and the owner told me when she hired me, you have to do a certain number of workshops, which is actually really exciting because usually in studios you have to kind of like fight for the ability to do that. And so I was just thinking over and over, what can I do? And I woke up one morning and it was as if the inside of me was yelling at me, you need to do something for caregivers. And so before the podcast, it was caregiving workshops at a yoga studio. And I realized that it's really hard to get caregivers into a yoga studio unless they're already members of that studio. And that just made me want to connect in a way that was more accessible to caregivers. And so I figured, well, how about if I just talk about the things that I had to go through, especially in the beginning? And I sat down and I wrote, and the list kept getting longer. And it was, resentment and anger and wanting to run away and learning how to like become a couple again. Like there were so many things that I thought, well, if I knew about these, or if I had heard from someone else's experiences about these, this all would have been so much easier. So in my head, I was like, all right, so I'll just, tell my story and hopefully it'll connect to other people. What I didn't expect, though, was for me to have to process some of those things in real time while putting together my podcast episodes. And so, especially in the beginning, I had to pause episodes so many times because it's the majority of the show is a solo show. So it's me telling a story and just to cry because I would say something. So this is all back to being able to process things by hearing them come out of your head is really what we need. And so I would say something that I already had prepared and it would hit me because I could hear it. And so I would have to pause the recording, cry it out. I have some videos on Instagram. You can, if you really look, my face starts to get red because when I was recording it, I was trying not to cry, even though I had probably said those lines multiple times. It was being vulnerable and putting myself out there. So that's not what I expected. I didn't expect to be vulnerable. I didn't expect that I even would be able to change a person's day. It was just me trying to do something for someone else. And so it's kind of morphed into this place where now I have people tell me, someone sent this to me and I went on a walk and I started listening to it and I had to stop because I was crying so hard. I couldn't see where I was going because you were actually saying the words that I was thinking in my head that day. And I've gotten some pushback. Sometimes I say things that are the true experience of a caregiver, and non-caregivers will say they get defensive, which I love because I need people to understand that if you're not a caregiver, you don't have to understand, and you also don't have to be defensive about it. It's about understanding what we need. And just because you didn't understand that your friend or your mother or your neighbor needed for you to do a little more of this, that's not me attacking you. It's me educating. But it's like simple things. Like I did a really, really silly Instagram post, and it was an actor crying in the front of it, and it's a video of the Mayo Clinic parking deck, and the caption on it says, me realizing that now that I am taking my husband home, I have to do all the work because there are no nurses. And I got so many people say, this is ridiculous. What kind of wife would say things like that? And I'm like, yeah, this is why caregivers don't like to let out how they're feeling, because they feel like they're going to be attacked and judged. And so let's just open up that conversation. Why do you feel like you have to judge? And I read them to my husband and he laughed and he was like, well, they don't know you. Like, that's what difference does it make? And I was like, because when people see this, and they're caregivers, then instantaneously, some of them will say, well, you see, they jumped on Charlotte for a really stupid post. Why would I tell my sister how I fear what my life would be like if my husband died? Right. So I'm okay with being the person that kind of pokes at the conversation and maybe irritates some people, because I think that we all need someone to kind of show up for caregivers, to let other people understand, not just caregivers, to understand it's okay. Like, these are real feelings. Like, yeah, of course you dread going back home because you had 5 days of a little bit of break when your person was in the hospital. Like, that's a normal reaction. But maybe if you told it to someone in your family, they would say, well, at least you weren't the one that was in the hospital, you know? So me being the person to say, you know what, that's enough. Like, we need to stop hiding what we're thinking. We need to start having these conversations between us and other caregivers and finding an outlet, because holding all that in just makes us feel lonelier. There's 52 million caregivers in the United States. We shouldn't feel like there isn't an outlet. Sometimes it's just hard for us to find the group of people that will be the safe space to listen to us.
Yeah.
So I hope that that's something that the podcast kind of brings in a small way to people who are just trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I really want to go back to, you saying the thing about your husband and getting pushed back, because it's so easy. Oh, okay. Rant time. It's so easy for non-family caregivers and people who've never taken care of anybody before to sit there and say to you, well, I would do it this way, and you shouldn't feel bad, and you don't need to feel this way, and it's not fair. And I told a friend recently, actually, I had this conversation with a friend recently, and my friend told me I was wrong at first. And I was like, no, I'm not wrong. I grieve my son, even though he's still alive and he's still here. I have moments where I grieve the life that I expected for him.
Yes.
Okay. I know, I'm sure my parents grieve moments that they expected for me too. I'm sure they wanted me to turn out better than I am also, but it's not even close to the same level. While all of my friends' kids graduate high school and go to college and get married and drive and do all these things, my son is missing all of these milestones in addition to the milestones that he's missed. I grieve that. I'm nostalgic for a life that I never got. And I've been told that I'm not allowed to feel that way because it's offensive to the autistic community. And I feel terrible, and I would never want to hurt anybody in any community. However, my experience as a parent, knowing what I'm missing hurts. It freaking hurts. And if you haven't walked that path, you don't have the right to say what I should be feeling. And I just really appreciate you for saying it. And I haven't walked your path of being a caregiver for other than like appendicitis and stupid stuff that he's recovered from. You know what I mean? Like I took care of him when he had a vasectomy, and it wasn't pleasant that day. But it's like, but I never I don't know. And I really wasn't thrilled bringing him home with how grumpy he was with the medication and everything like that he was on. But I think was kind of like, can I just leave you there?
I know. But grief is something that all of us have to deal with, and trying to say that we shouldn't or that it doesn't happen. Caregivers of people who aren't caregivers of children, of older parents, your life changes, and you have it's valid for you to grieve the life that you thought you were going to have, that the job that you thought you really wanted to have, but now you can't take because you know that you can't do it. Not seeing milestones happen. Of course, you have the right to want to grieve, but also I think that we are in a place where we can't have conversations easily where both people don't agree, but they are seeking to be curious and understand, right? To be able to have a conversation with someone who can say, I don't understand your perspective, but I'd like to learn more. And also I'd like to share how I see things, but you don't have to, I'm not trying to convert you into believing my life is better and that you should take that stance, because we all have to make decisions about our families that are valid for us and might not ever work for anybody else. And I just wish we could have that, where you and I could talk about something and I'm like, well, I believe A, and Sarah says, I believe B. And I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about why and not get upset and angry. It's not an attack. So it's unfortunate because it's not just in the caregiver space. It's everywhere. And I grew up, I have a master's in history, like having these quote unquote arguments were what we were supposed to do. And it felt good to be able to discuss two different opposing views, because sometimes you learn more about yourself when you realize you have to advocate for yourself in a topic that you never thought you had to. Like, then what you're secure about and what you might change your mind on. So it's unfortunate. But I would love to have more of those conversations.
Well, exactly. And again, I love that you're doing what you're doing on your show, and that, and that you're pushing the boundaries. And also another thing that goes unrecognized with family caregivers, there has to be humor.
Oh,
Like,
yes.
Sometimes
dark humor.
it's so serious. Like,
Yeah.
caregiving can be so freaking serious sometimes that you have to like find the humor. And I learned that working in healthcare at 17 years old. I was told by one of the nurses, if you can't find the humor in some of these situations, you are going to cry every single day. And I am not a crier. And I had times where my son was naked jumping on the trampoline in front of the window. And instead of getting mad about it, I'm like, you know what? It is what it is. I'm just going to close the curtains. And hopefully, like, fingers crossed, he doesn't pee everywhere. And, but you just have to find the humor in these like dark, difficult moments.
Yeah, definitely.
I was in Dollar Tree the other day with my son, and he like destroyed an entire shelf. And I'm trying to clean up, but as I'm cleaning up, he is just making a bigger mess. And everything I'll like get 3 things put away, and he'll like knock 5 more things over. And so this 90-year-old woman, God bless this woman, this 90-year-old woman comes over and starts helping. And I'm not one to walk away from a mess, especially if I've created it.
Yeah.
I was raised better than that. We were all taught better than that. And after, I don't know, 6 times of me and this woman trying to clean up, and my son just immediately, like, before we have a chance to do anything, destroying everything, she says, it's better if you just walk away. And we get out of the store, and we're going to get in the truck after that. And my son he's in a hitting phase, and he's just wailing on me as I'm getting him in the truck. After we get the 3 things we needed from Dollar Tree, he is just wailing on me. And I sit in the car and I breathe, and I don't know if I want to laugh, cry, or scream, because it was so traumatic and so stressful. And then also, when I was in line with him, the cashier, who didn't see everything, said, "Oh, it's Joey," because we're in the Dollar Tree like every day.
Yeah.
She's like, "Joey's such a good boy." And I'm like, did you not see what
you might change your mind when you go to aisle 5?
But it's like, and then it's like, I call my mom and I tell her the story, and she doesn't know on the phone. Like, do I laugh at the situation?
Right.
Do I let my daughter scream, or do I let her cry? Like, what do we do here? But it's the truth, though. In caregiving, you have to find the humor in those situations, as difficult as they may be in the moment, as stressful as it may be, as hard as it may be, as controversial as it may be, as much as it might be I really just don't want to do it, but I know I have to.
Yeah.
And it's okay to say that, and you have to find the humor. So I applaud you for that.
Thank you.
I want to get on to my final few questions. My favorite question to ask my guests: what is your favorite form of self-care?
So right now, because I have the baseline that is just in my life, and that's just because I've been doing it all the time, is just, breathing practice and meditation and some kind of movement, and being mindful and giving myself the opportunity to just not do things that would cause me extra stress to do in a day, being okay with just saying I'm done and that can wait. But right now, there's actually two things that just for the past couple of weeks I've started to do for fun is just to sing, and to color actually. I need something to take me away from electronics. Usually this time of the year, it's just time to take a break and for me in my life, to enjoy just being myself. And so I'm not going to say I'm a good singer, but the music services now have the lyrics on there. One day, over the Thanksgiving break, I had YouTube karaoke and I was singing while my husband was doing something and my daughter, we were all in the same room. It would have been the weirdest thing for another person to see. I just singing, it changes my breath first of all, and it's a release, and it brings emotions up that maybe I've been trying to suppress for some reason. There's songs that I definitely always cry to and I don't know why, but I'm like, whatever, this is my crying song. And then the coloring is just to bring focus. I'm not like a big time adult colorer, but there are some times where I'm like, all right, let's take out the markers and let's do this. And I think having it change all the time is what makes it feel special, which then enhances the positive effect of it. If I don't color or sing all the time, when I do it, then I'm definitely doing something for myself because it's not a normal thing. So that's what I've been doing the past couple of weeks for sure.
Yeah. I like that. I actually really like the singing. We got my son a karaoke machine for Christmas last year,
Nice.
and some of the like most family fun that we've had was family karaoke night. We can't really go to a karaoke place with my younger son, so
Right.
family karaoke night at home with a glass of wine and
Yeah.
sudden death karaoke where everyone puts a song in a hat and you get the song you get whether you know it or not. That,
That's
it can
awesome.
be fun, or even friends.
Yeah.
Something like that with a good laugh
Hmm.
is great self-care. It also helps with isolation, and
Right.
I can, or if you're not comfortable singing in front of people, just go sing in your car. That's
Yes.
my other favorite thing to do is play my music nice and loud in the truck and sing
Yes.
as loud as I can. So I love it. Where can my audience find you for more information?
Yeah, you can find everything at loveyourcaregivinglife.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Charlotte, I want to thank you so much again for being here. I'm so grateful that you took the time to come on. I loved our conversation and your approach to self-care. It's and just even just humor and caregiving. It's been therapeutic for me.
Well,
So
thank you, Sarah, for having me. I really appreciate it.
thank you. And I want to thank everyone for listening this week to this week's episode. I highly recommend you check out Charlotte's website and her podcast, loveyourcaregivinglife.com, which will be linked in the show notes. Um, if you've enjoyed this episode and you want to help support us, you can do so at Buy Me a Coffee. You can find that link on our website, stelmacbrownmedia.com. From there, you can go to the Caregiver Chronicles page and you can find any and all information Caregiver Chronicles related. If you really like this episode and you can't support us monetarily, that is perfectly fine. We ask that you share this episode with a friend or anyone who might need to hear this information. Again, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next week.